Hey everyone, today I'll show you how to model this cute little bridge. First, let's create these poles right here. Therefore, we simply add in a cube. And if we press tab, we can go into edit mode. If we press GZ, we can move it up. And let's hold Control to snap it onto the grid. And then let go. Back into object mode, let's scale it down and let's also scale it on the Z-axis up. Perfect. Now we can continue to add in a subdivision surface. Don't worry, it looks super weird now, but we can fix this. Press tab to go into edit mode. And now we add in some loop cuts. Therefore, just press Ctrl R and left click. Now we can move this loop cut up and down, move it all the way up, left click again. Let's add in a second one, Ctrl R, and let's move this one down. With this, we can create a super simple pole. We can also up the level of resolution in the subdivision surface to 2, and we have something like this. Alright, let's create the smaller poles. Therefore, we just press Shift D to duplicate it, right click to snap it back. And if we press G now, we can move it around, X for the X-axis, and again, if you hold Control, you can snap it onto these grid sections. Let's move it over 2 to the left, and let's also scale it down on the Z-axis, something like this. Let's duplicate it again, right click, and move it over again to grid sections, and scale it on the Z-axis. Let's move this one up a little bit. Yeah, this looks good. Now we can simply duplicate those again, Shift D, and move them over. And we have the first section ready. To create the other side, we can use a mirror modifier. Therefore, we have to select all these objects, Shift select the middle one so it glows a little bit brighter orange than all the others, and press Ctrl J. This will merge them all together, so we only have one object left. Let's add in a modifier, and this time we use the mirror modifier. But as you can see, nothing is happening. That's because we need a mirror object where the object should be mirrored at. For this, we can simply add in a plain axis empty. Select the object again, and in the mirror object you can use this eyedropper tool and select the empty you just created. If we now move this object on the y-axis, still nothing is happening. That's because the axis it should mirror is set to X. We need to deselect this and select the y-axis, and now we can see the result. If we move it now on the y-axis, it gets closer together or further apart. Let's change the location of this to something like 0.5, and this looks good to me. In this stage, we can also left click and shade smooth so the poles look a little bit more polished. Stick to the end. There I will also show you how to customize and stylize each single pole to make it look more interesting. The next thing we look at are not these planks, but the wood underneath it. Those are actually super simple. They are just cubes stretched out and rotated in the right position. So let's add in a simple cube and scale it down. Let's also rename this object to Pulse. And now we want to go into side view. Either you can go to View, Viewport, and choose a view from where you want to watch it, or use the numpad. So let's go into one of these side views and move the cube to the front. Let's scale it on the X-axis and rotate it a bit. Let's scale it down. Something like this looks good. Now duplicate it and move it to the front, rotate it. And we also want to scale this one up, but only in its length. But if we would press S and X now, it would also stretch in the Z-axis a little bit, because the object is rotated now. To prevent this from happening, we can change it from global to local, and now Blender will only scale it on the axis of the object. So let's scale this one up and move it a little bit. Now let's select all of those and move them to the side, and as you can see, you can get super weird lines that because the axis is still set to local. So let's change this back to global, and now we can move it normally. All we have to do now is to duplicate these poles or to mirror it. To mirror it, we also have to select all of these again with Shift, and last Shift select the middle one and press Command J. This will merge them again into one object. On this object we can add in a mirror modifier. To have it mirrored on the right axis, we also have to set the mirror object to the empty, so let's select the eyedropper tool and select the empty in the middle. And as you can see, the x-axis is already mirrored the right way. Just select the y-axis too, and we have a perfect symmetrical structure. Right now these two wood parts clip into each other, therefore we can just press Tab to go into edit mode. Let's go into face selection mode, or just press 3, select the front face right now and move it a little back, and all the other things will update in real time. That's because we have used the mirror modifier, and voila, this looks great. These wood parts down here I just placed manually, so I created a cube, stretched it out, duplicate it and place it at the right position. So let's do this. If you want to see what's behind these poles, either you can hide them with pressing H or Alt H to unhide them, or you can toggle the X-ray mode right now to see what's behind the pole. At this point you can go into side view, toggle the X-ray mode and just duplicate it and place them where they should belong. Alright, this looks fine. If you want to merge them also into one object, you can select these, select the middle part the last, press Ctrl J, and you have merged them into one object. The other option would be just to move them in a separate collection. On the final bridge, I also added these metal parts down here which hold those logs together, and we also will create these. For this, let's hide our poles and add in a new cube. Let's go into side view and let's scale it down. Let's also scale it on the x-axis, something like this. For the metal part, I want the edges to be a little bit more round. Therefore, we press Ctrl A to apply the scale, and then we can search for the bevel modifier. In here, let's play around with the amount. This should be super low. Let's go for 0.001. Just find the setting that works for your scene. Let's up the segments to 3, which is alright. And click this little arrow and hit apply to apply the bevel. To add the screw details, we can simply add in a sphere. Let's move this one to the side. Let's press Tab to go into edit mode, and in side view activate the X-ray mode, select the top part, press delete faces, and we only have half a sphere left. It looks a little bit too round, so let's scale it also on the Z-axis to make it a little bit more realistic. You can right click and shade it smooth, and this thing right now we will call screw head. And make sure you don't use this one right now because we will use it later, so just duplicate it and move it onto your object. Let's also rotate it 90 degrees. You can just press R, type in 90, and then the axis you want to rotate it on. So I pressed X. Now let's move it onto the object right here. Let's scale it down a little bit, duplicate it, move it onto the other side. Now I also want to combine these into one object, so select all of them and press Ctrl J to merge them into one. Go into side view, press Shift D to duplicate it and move it onto the next part. Let's rotate it a little bit, press Shift D again and move it down here. Now we want to mirror these objects. If we would select all of these, merge them together, add in a mirror modifier, select the empty and mirror it on the X and Y axis. First it would look quite good, so you can see it gets mirrored over here and onto the other side, but the object in the middle will get duplicated like 2 times. That's why we have to do this in 2 steps. First, select only the middle object, add in a mirror modifier, choose the empty as the mirror object and mirror it on the Y axis. Now only this object is mirrored. Let's head over to the other 2 objects down here. Shift select both and press Ctrl J to merge them into one. add in a mirror modifier. As before, select the empty as the mirrored object and choose X and Y axis. Now we have this object mirror onto this side and the other side, and the middle part is a separate object so it doesn't get duplicated. If you would like to merge these objects together to only have one, you can select them and apply the mirror modifier on both of them. Shift select them, press Ctrl J, and we have them in one object. But only do this if your object is ready for exporting into a game engine. If you still want to make changes, leave the mirror modifiers on there. Perfect, now let's also add the screw head details that should hold these logs down here in place. Let's do the exact same thing as before. We have the screw head on the right side here, duplicate it so we still have a backup. Let's rotate this 90 degrees on the x-axis. Let's go into side view, scale it down, place it correctly. We could also toggle X-ray mode so we see where it should actually go. Again, let's go into side view, toggle the X-ray mode, duplicate it and place it into the right position. As before, we have to mirror these separately like the metal sinks we did before. So let's select the middle screw head and add in a mirror modifier. Select the empty and mirror it on the Y-axis. Select the other two parts with Shift, press Ctrl J to merge them into one object. Also add in a mirror modifier for the X and Y location, and the mirror object should be the empty in the middle. And as you can see, everything is just fine. If this is your final look, you can apply the mirror modifiers on both of these, shift select them, press Ctrl J, and now we have merged them into one object. Perfect, now we can start with the super fun part with the planks on top of the bridge. First of all, let's add in a cube and scale it the right proportion. So let's scale it down like this. Let's scale it on the Y-axis. In front view, it should be way smaller. So let's scale it down on the Z-axis. And we have a nice little plank. On top of these planks, we also want the screws. So let's duplicate this screw again and let's place it where it should be. Perfect, this time we have to select all of these three objects already and press Ctrl J to merge them into one object. Cool, now if you think we have to manually place all of these planks on top of the bridge, this is not the case. Luckily, we can do this with a little bit of help. Let's jump into side view and add in a path. Let's move this path to the start and press tab to go into edit mode, and now we can change the vertices of this path. First, we delete all of the front vertices and select the last vertex. Move this one to the start right here and press E to extrude. Now we just trace our bridge from here. So always press E to extrude and trace it. Try to make sure that you stay kinda in the middle of all these logs. It doesn't have to be perfect, but try your best. If this is done, it should look something like this. Let's select our plank over here and add in an array modifier. Change the relative offset of the x-axis to match the distance you would like to have. And now we can change the fit type from fixed count to fit curve. In here, we can select the curve we just created before, so it's the NURBS path 001. Now the planks should have the length of this curve, but why isn't this the case? It's because we haven't applied the scale yet. So select the plank, press Ctrl A and select scale. Now the planks have the exact same length as the path. All we have to do now is move it into the right position. Now we have the right length of the planks, but not the right curvature. Luckily, there is a modifier for it. So let's go to modifier and add in the curve modifier, the deform curve. The curve object should also be this curve we have created before. So let's select this with the eyedropper tool. Now if we move our object on the x-axis and move it back, it gets perfectly curved on the line we created before. All we have to do now is to move this one a little bit more up, and there we go. If you want to make some changes, always do this in edit mode. So press tab to go into edit mode. This will move the object maybe to a different location, but this doesn't matter. In here we can scale it on the y-axis, which also updates all the other objects. If we press tab again, it will snap everything back and we can see the Y scale is applied. The same thing goes for the screw heads. If we want to move them a little bit more to the right side, because here is the log, we can go back into edit mode. Let's toggle X-ray mode and select all of the screw parts. Let's move it a little bit more to the right side, maybe even scale it down, something like this. Let's do the same for the other one over here. And if we press tab again, we snap back into reality and we can see it got updated. Just play around until you have the right setting for you. So the only thing that is left is the rope, and this is how it works. First we have to create a Bezier curve. Let's move this one up and look at it from the top. If we press tab to go into edit mode, we can play around with the handles. Let's select the handle right here and let's rotate it straight. So let's rotate it on the Z axis and move it in a straight line. Press tab again to go into object mode. Let's go to side view and move it to the start. In this position we can press tab again, go into edit mode and move around the start and the end point. The cool thing about the Bezier curve is that we can rotate it and move the handles, so we can create this kind of rope line right here. The only problem we could face right now is if we select this point and extrude it, we get a weird wiggly line over here. If we try to fix this and rotate the middle point, this one looks good, but this side is messed up. Luckily there is also a simple way to fix this. Let's select this point, right click, and under set handle type we can change it to free. Now we can freely adjust both of these handles separately and we can create a rope curve for both these gaps. Let's continue this over here. Let's also set this to free and extrude it, and let's rotate it so it looks good. Alright, if you're happy with your line, we can move it onto the side and go into the line settings down here. Under the geometry tab, under bevel and round, we can change the depth. So let's put this to 0.1 and you can see the rope gets some volume. 0.1 is way too much, so let's change it to 0.01. This is maybe a little bit too less, so let's change it to 0.05. Again, play around with the settings until you find something that suits for your scene. Perfect. Either you duplicate this one and move it onto the other side, or you could also mirror this. Do whatever you please. Alright, congratulations, your bridge is finally done. If you want to stylize your bridge right now, you can stay on this video a little longer. If not, that's fine with me, and maybe I see you in the next video. First, let's stylize the poles. Select them and press tab to go into edit mode. With Ctrl R, we can add in a loop cut as before, and let's select it and move it up. Now with the loop cut selected, we can simply press G to move it around. With this technique we can also add in more loop cuts and move it around a little bit just to create some bending in the wood. Maybe this pole was here a little too long and the water bent this whole pole. This could look super funny. You can do this for all the other poles too, so simply press Ctrl R, move it up and just move it around. Because we have the mirror modifier activated, this pole on this side looks the exact same as this one. If we want to have an even more stylized bridge, we can go into the modifiers and apply the mirror modifier. And if we press tab to go into edit mode now, we can also change the poles over here and the other one doesn't get affected. Alright, and let's also create some funny planks. Select them, press tab to go into edit mode, and again let's add in a loop cut. Move this over here and select only this edge. Let's move this one a little bit more down, something like this. So we have a cool little edge at the bottom here. Let's also add in a second loop cut over here. Let's select this edge and move this edge a little bit more up. And now as you can see, we have an edge right here and the edge right here. This just makes the whole thing looks way more funny. And again, just play around with it. You can also shorten this one on the right side to make it look something like this. In here, only your creativity is the limit. If we press tab to snap back into the object mode, we can see it gets all applied. Now, if you want to do separate changes for a single plank, duplicate this whole setup so we have a backup if this one doesn't work. And with the duplicated version, we can apply the array and the curve modifier. And now if we press tab to go into edit mode, you can see you can change each of these planks individually. So let's say we only want to change this one right now. We can move this one up, and now only this plank looks different. Alright, I hope you could learn something today. If you want to see more modeling tutorials, just write it in the comments, and I see you the next time. Peace out.